The AFD and BSW are now established facts in the German political landscape. Are the far left and far right the Trojan horse for Russia, or is this a local or even European phenomenon? Is this the last act of a Cold War? Perhaps we should just follow the money. Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
The AFD has won a state election for the first time, receiving nearly 33% of the votes in Thuringia. It also came in second in Saxony, where it has just one seat less than the center-right CDU. AFD's anti-immigration, Eurosceptic and isolationist stance has led to significant criticism from other political forces and has been a cause for concern among large parts of the German public.
This is a serious, I think, blow to the mainstream political parties here in Germany. And if you look across Europe, it fits with a pattern. If you look around, look at the Netherlands, look at Italy, we've had far-right or hard-right parties making gains in other countries besides Germany.
The parties forming the governing coalition at the federal level, namely the SDP, the FDP and the Greens, performed poorly in the elections. In Thuringia, they received a combined less than 11% of the votes, and in Saxony they received 13%. The Greens lost 5 out of 7 seats in Saxony and all 5 in Thuringia.
These Eastern European states have never been our stronghold. The party has lost a lot of trust through the way in which it has mismanaged the pursuit of our transformational goals in federal policymaking, in the government, in Berlin.
The electoral success of the AFD highlights the growing dissatisfaction among voters with the established German political parties. They also show that 35 years after their reunification, major differences remain between the eastern and western parts of the country.
Our guest today is Witold Rodkiewicz. He is from the Centre for Eastern Studies. Welcome once more to the programme.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It's always a pleasure.
It's great to have you. The relationship between Germany and Russia, I suppose, is the overall theme of our discussion. What do you make of the victories in Thuringia and Saxony by ostensibly pro-Russian or anti-US parties and their relationship with Russia? What were your immediate reactions to that?
First of all, this is a political development that makes Kremlin very happy, and the Kremlin also thinks this is the wave of the future, so they are hoping the same kind of results are going to be in federal elections next year.
Yeah.
German policy specialists tell us that these trends are local trends and they don't necessarily will have impact on federal elections. So this is not a foregone conclusion, but it is a political problem for the ruling coalition. It is also the case that I think it's for the first time that radical parties, radical in the German sense, which are sort of traditionally classified, one of them as extreme right-wing and the other one as extreme left-wing, have gathered sufficient number of votes that it will be impossible to create provincial governments without the participation of one of them. Because the German mainstream parties had an informal agreement, which was actually extremely effective.
This firewall idea.
Yes, that you don't enter into coalitions with these parties that are considered to be beyond the respectable. On the one hand, this was the AfD with its nationalist, rightist, high not sufficiently expert in German things to use the term fascist. I'm not sure that they qualify for that.
Yes, it's probably an overused phrase.
But definitely in terms of their attitude towards the established mainstream foreign policy of Federal Republic, they are definitely, beyond the pale. And on the other hand, there's this new party of a East German politician who used to be a member of the German Socialist Unity Party, this old communist party during the existence of the DDR. And then I believe she was a member of this post-communist party, PDS. But then she broke with the party because the party was, to her, not sufficiently radical, and founded her own party last year, or this year, or last year, but very recently. And then she had this extremely good result in these elections, where she actually beat some of the establishment
into
parties.
Single figures.
Yes. So I don't know how the German elite is going to deal with that. I mean, the mainstream parties. There is a heated discussion, as I understand, in CDU, which is in opposition, but it was also doing quite well because it's in opposition, and this was clearly a vote against the current coalition government, because they will have to form a coalition government either with the left or with the right, and there are people in the party who are going to be, some of them are, and the party, in other words, there are different options about that. And some people are already threatening. I saw on Twitter some of the members of the parliament, deputies, who were writing that if the party actually accepts a coalition with the leftist, with the Mrs. Wagenknecht party, they are going to quit because they cannot accept a coalition with Lenin. She is actually a very hardcore Leninist.
But nonetheless, they've taken about 40% of the electoral vote in both of these states. Yes. That's a huge jolt to the mentality of the elite, who probably thought of history as being linear. It was always going to be progressive and leftist.
I hope so.
History is dynamic.
Because the problem with, as I see it, and I look at it through German approaches to the war in Ukraine and to the Russian policy, there has been a dramatic shift, especially, but I would say more in rhetoric than in practice. And the whole debate about the budget and the military spending, and also German policy towards war, Russian-Ukraine war, also indicate that there is a lot of continuity, in the sense that Germany cannot still, German establishment or significant influential section of it, and actually that section is now in power, because who runs foreign policy in Russia? Russlandpolitik is in the hands of the chancellor, not Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is actually run by people who are actually probably most radical in German terms as far as seeing the need for the revision of the established German attitudes towards Russia. I mean, the Green Party. But it's in the current system, it's the chancellor office and the chancellor with his faction of the SPD party and a couple of advisors who are running the thing.
But in one way, it's a revolutionary movement, but in another way, it's a reversion to a traditional German policy of Russo-German amity.
Yes, that's and actually, I was saying this one, the parties that won the elections, the local elections, the provincial elections, one on the extreme right, one on the extreme left, what they have in common is that they are both heavily anti-American, and they both advocate a policy of reconciliation with Russia. They are claiming that Germany has no business in supporting Ukraine, that it should be a priority or the priority to negotiate with Russia and to end the war on whatever terms. They are not saying that openly, but that's what it means in practice and what they actually accept. Because Germany cannot afford, and it's for them unthinkable that Germany might offer armed resistance, for example, and enter into some kind of conflict. And they also, I think, don't believe that Germany has any business to offer security guarantees, which they do offer because they are members of NATO. And for them, this is unacceptable, and this is their platform, which they are winning. This is part of their platform. It's an important plank of their platform.
Yes.
So that indicates that Germany is still kind of wobbling as far as accepting the necessity and the need to change the assumption that security in Europe has to be built against Russia by creating deterrence and helping Ukraine to defend itself, but they still think that it's absolutely must to have a security arrangement with Russia.
From the Russian point of view, as you said, they must be very happy. The champagne corks must be popping in the Kremlin as we speak. Do we have any discernible evidence of intervention in these elections, or does Russia simply know what the interests of these groups are, these radical parties, and let them get on with it? They've done their work for the Russians. The Russians don't need to push them. Is that?
I think that this is very okay. I have to admit that I didn't study this in detail, and the details are very important here. It's very easy to formulate, the blanket accusations and so on. But I think the Russians, in a way, were working towards this and was trying to influence this by their official propaganda, and one can see that, and especially by trying to influence the 2-3 million voters who are migrants, who so-called German Russians or Russian Germans, people who still watch Russian TV and are basically use Russian in their daily lives.
You can still see the pro-Russian demonstrations in
yes,
Berlin.
and there is, and they were trying to persuade them, and I think they're relatively effective in selling them the Russian line on the war and the need to be radically opposed to the establishment, because the Russians were also using another important plank, which is especially for AFD, but also for the extreme left, strangely enough, the anti-immigrant, meaning the unhappiness. They work on the unhappiness that is shared by the growing number of Germans about the results and the consequences of the basically the Angela Merkel famous or infamous declaration, and this is and the Russian propaganda and the Russian media were extremely active in stimulating that and playing on that. So in that sense, we can say that they had a long-term policy of supporting these parties in that part of the German public that has those beliefs. The Russians were building their presence by becoming, for example, the Gazprom used to sponsor. I don't know whether it can still do that. Football clubs. And there were also interesting cases that we know that were actually investigated. This was actually in East Germany, in the area that's in the province that's on the Baltic Sea, when the local, actually governing local on the province, SPD, branch of SPD, was funding NGOs that were officially they were environmental, but in fact they were in the business of organizing propaganda and kind of behind the scene influence in favor of NS Nord Stream 2. This was during when this issue was being debated. So I think that it would be very difficult to. The Russians have a long history and a long experience in financing various activities. And the Western economic system allows this. It's very difficult to trace money. Money changes hands. There are these havens, tax havens. You send money to some NGO in Bermuda, and then it's very difficult to trace. But there were, and perhaps people were offered various, and there were hints of this and indications in German press that some prominent members, for example, of AFD, were traveling to Moscow, and they seem to have had some sources of income. It's done very. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. They can offer also such things as they did. That was also public knowledge. To prominent members of the German establishment, offers seats on Russian company boards.
Very hard politics has returned to Germany, it would seem. But Witold Rutkiewicz, thank you very much for coming along to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, as I said.
So that's all we have time for today. Please do join us next time for How We Got Here.